We are 1 month out from the NFL draft, so naturally we already have our Fast Draft Origins tournament rolling right now. We already got rookie drafts going in Dynasty, so I have Theo Gremminger right now. We just dropped our rookie guide, and we're going to talk about our top 12 rookie wide receivers right here on Fast Draft. All right, Theo, we're going to go through here. We got our top 12, and we did this with the consensus. It was me, John Lobb, Cody Carpentier, several of us. So I actually have disagreements with our top 12, and we're going to go and break these down, starting with our top wide receiver in the rookie class. It's Tetairoa McMillan. I know we're at this point now where we keep picking at him where, well, he didn't run his 40. Is he too slow? Is he this? Is he that? Do you have any concerns about Tetairoa McMillan, or do you think we should think this is an easy no-brainer?
No, I mean, Jed Fish said that this is the best athlete he's ever been around. And of course you need to hype up a guy you used to coach and the guy who helped you get this big job at Washington. But Tetairoa McMillan, his game is not predicated on being the fastest guy on the field. He's got that huge frame. Drake London never ran a 40. Drake London's turned out pretty well. So I think I hate having like an equal comparison, but I think that Drake London path for Tetairoa McMillan, that sort of target share, that sort of usage, they'll be kind of similar. For me, Tetairoa McMillan, it doesn't really matter. We know he's not slow. We know he's not for his size. 4.5s is perfectly fine. 4.6 would have been okay. I think for him, anything sub 4.6 is fine. I think it looks like, depending on how much you trust a Pro Day 40, somewhere in that 4.55 range, perfectly fine. He's my wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's like you said, it's perfectly respectable for his type of game. You know, if we were talking about Isaiah Bond or someone like this, and then he didn't run a 40, then I would be worried. But Tetairoa McMillan is 6'5", has quick feet, and we see the separation on tape that's just fine. And again, he's a size guy. Mike Evans wasn't blazing fast either, and he's got some of those comps as well. Honestly, my only worry with him, like right now, if I'm doing early drafts, especially like our Origins tournament, I'm smashing Tetairoa McMillan. The only thing that worries me is his landing spot. The Patriots, obviously a good place. The Raiders, I worry what they're doing at quarterback. The Panthers would be a good spot. It's like the Browns. What if the Browns take him? What are they going to do then? But other than that, I think we're just getting silly. And like you said, we're at this weird time of year where all we have is metrics and numbers. So numbers like the 40 or whatever we're going to focus on and say that he sucks. And it's a collection of things, guys. It's a collection of numbers, So I think that is pretty easy, and we're going to move on to more controversial things. But before we go, if you want more from me, more from Fast Draft, hit that like and subscribe button. And as I mentioned before, we have our Origins tournament going right now. You have 1 month to get in. We're at almost 25% full right now. We have $25,000 in prizes going on right now for that tournament. That is a rookie draft, guys. If you're over here doing mocks, just go over and actually put something down for money. Put your money where your mouth is. Sign up now. You can use our code FAST. I have one, Jagger. We're all over the place right now. You want to get in right now before we fill up. Also, another thing, we got a lot of stuff going on right now. As I mentioned, we released our rookie guide. I'll have a link to that in the description as well, where we talk about almost every one of these prospects. Theo, you've done a great job on there doing all those write-ups. We have comps, the whole shebang. I even have those displayed right here on the screen for you. That's what these player cards are. They're just from our rookie guide. So if you want more details, download that right now. Now, I want to move over to our wide receiver 2. This is when I actually put this show sheet together, where I was like, do we really have Emeka Egbuka as wide receiver 2? Theo, are you there? Because I'm not there. Not I think he's bad.
Yeah, it's sort of a, where are you at on Luther Burden? Where are you at on Travis Hunter's positional eligibility for us in fantasy? Obviously, for me, Emeka Egbuka represents a safe pick. The argument being, does he have that elite upside to deliver on this sort of price? I would argue that wide receiver 2 in this class might be lower in a lot of formats than in previous years. When it comes to Egbuka, landing spot's going to matter. Usage is going to matter. There's pathways where his usage could be similar to a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba. I know our friend Dave Kluge has made the he could end up getting Amon-Ra St. Brown's usage in certain situations. I don't necessarily see that. For Egbuka, it's a really safe type player. Does he have the upside to back it up as the wide receiver 2? Depends on what you're going for here. Depends on when you're making the selection in your draft. I don't see Egbuka coming in and failing as a pro. And I think if he lands correctly, he lands in that power slot role. We saw where Rashee Rice was headed last year. I think that's what you want to see with Egbuka. A team use him in that Rashee Rice-like role out of the power slot, and make him be like sort of the easy button target for a number of NFL offenses. Now, if he lands in a situation where he's surrounded by other high-end target earners, I think we've got to quickly adjust post-NFL draft. But I do think he'll check off a box. He's going to be a top 40 draft capital guy. He has the potential to step right in as a slot with size. And if the landing spot works, I think Emeka Egbuka has a chance to be a leading target earner for an NFL team, probably in year 2, with a chance that this year as a rookie could be in that 115 to 120 target range, depending on the spot. Again, it doesn't seem like a high upside ranking. I would agree with you on that. But with Egbuka, I think a lot of people just walking away saying, I like him, don't know if I necessarily love him for fantasy football.
Yeah, and that's the key point that you mentioned. It's the fantasy element, because I think Emeka Egbuka is a better football player than he may be for us, like a fantasy guy. And yeah, like Dave, happy birthday, Dave. It was his birthday yesterday. The Amon-Ra St. Brown,
How old is Dave?
37, 36,
okay.
37.
All right.
Yeah.
All
right. Older than me, and that's all that matters. So I think that the usage is key, and the Amon-Ra St. Brown role, it's close, but it's not quite right, because to me, my comp for him is Rashee Rice. And that goes back to the other things that you said. I think it's the usage. I think it's the team that he goes to, and that will determine his overall ceiling. If someone's going to use him as a power slot and pepper him with targets, and he goes to a spot, like you said, that doesn't have high competition or has complementary competition. Let's say, like, let's use the Chiefs, for example. Let's say Rashee Rice didn't exist, or he went to a different team. Having him and pairing him with someone like Xavier Worthy and a tight end, that's the perfect balance of building like a good receiver core, a good set of targets for a quarterback. I love that for him. So let's say he goes to like the Jets or something, like they pick him up round 2. I don't see you don't
I
like
wouldn't
that.
like that. I wouldn't like that one.
You wouldn't?
No, I wouldn't love it. I think that, I don't know. It's a, yes, would he have a clear pathway to be the number 2 target opposite Garrett Wilson? Yes, but he'd be surrounded by another guy who is going to get a massive target share in Wilson, and a running back who's going to get targets out of the backfield. I'm not sure about that one. Like, I don't know. It's not the worst one. It's early round 2.
I was going to say, give me a landing spot then that you think would be ideal for him then.
I like the idea of Egbuka going to New England. I think New England, also at the beginning of round 2, if he falls out of round 1, it's been sort of if Mike Vrabel is going to chase the old New England Patriots narratives and he goes out and gets himself a slot that we build the passing game around, you think back to guys like Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, different kinds of player than Egbuka, but in terms of usage, is that the kind of guy that Drake May could really lean into? I think also in that situation, he could be the potential red zone target on that team. I like that sort of landing spot for Egbuka if he does fall out of the first round. And I'll say when we go down into the back half of the first round, there's a couple of these landing spots that I think we can't discount. Houston Texans, despite getting Christian Kirk, they gave up a 7th round pick for Christian Kirk. So I don't think that Christian Kirk is going to prohibit them from taking a wideout if they love the guy at 25. I think that's an interesting spot. And despite Jayden Reed being a guy that we want to see in the slot for people that really believe in Jayden Reed, 23 overall for Green Bay, for me, that's an offense that's screaming for a high-end target earner to help Jordan Love. For me, I think there's a couple of like spots there when it comes to Egbuka. Beginning of the second round, I'll also bring up the Tennessee Titans, where that's a team that is dying to add youth at the wide
Talent.
receiver spot and talent at the wide receiver spot. And I'll throw out, that's the scenario where you could get an offensive focal point type scenario where when you look at Tennessee, they're screaming for a player to build their offense around. They have all these guys that are okay for fantasy, guys like Tony Pollard, guys like Tajay, guys like Calvin Ridley, but no one there that like really scares you. I think that would be a pathway. And then I'll throw out Jacksonville at 36 with, I think, could end up being a really fun offense. Obviously, they signed Diami Brown, but that's not a guy who in fantasy football is going to make a huge impact. More of a real-life football fit there. Obviously, moved on from Christian Kirk, moved on from Evan Ingram, Brenton Strange at tight end. Jacksonville will be a really good spot for him. So a couple of spots there. Jets at 42, I guess I don't hate it. I haven't really thought about that spot as much, but I think I like the other ones a little bit more because, again, Garrett Wilson, he can't get away from these Ohio State wide receivers. We want to get him away from these high-end target-earning Buckeyes.
I guess, and the reason why I picked him is like, as much as a lot of people will be like, well, he won't be the alpha, whatever. We've seen that if offenses have multiple good receivers, as long as they have the quarterback, and that's the key with the Jets, as long as they have the quarterback that can get it there, the volume would be there. The Jets have no one else. Malachi Corley's not real.
No.
I can't name another wide receiver on that team. And then there's like Tyler Conklin, like you said, Brees. So like the guys you mentioned, that's it. That's there. But I really like the Packers fit because a lot of people hate Romeo Doubs. He's going to be kind of a sacrificial X. He's going to earn targets, but I don't think he's going to be the guy. Jayden Reed can move to the Z flanker and to the slot. Having someone like Egbuka there gives him like a focus. So I like that a lot. The other one that you said that really stuck out to me, that I liked a lot was, the Texans, because again, we forget that they kind of don't have a receiver after Nico Collins. Tank Dell is busted up. We don't even know if we can be the same player or if they want to commit to him because he can't stay healthy at that size. Stephon Diggs still isn't signed anywhere. So I think that's honestly probably the best spot where he goes back with his college quarterback there. I love that. And again, you nailed it. If he goes to a spot like that, I could see have him in wide receiver 2 and go early. Just right now, it's hard for me to be there because I like some of these higher upside guys. And as someone like Matthew Golden, who's really risen up here lately, are you one that believes the hype in Matthew Golden right now, or do you think it's gotten out of hand?
So I remember podcasting with you on Dynasty Life, my show, like 6 weeks ago, and we talked about Matthew Golden. I'm very high on Golden. I think in my own personal rankings, as we keep moving along here, Golden is steaming up towards wide receiver 2. I think Golden, when we talk about chasing upside, does the safety exist for him like Egbuka, where I think that it's, no matter what Matthew Golden hits? I don't see Egbuka failing as a pro. But when we talk about Golden, I've made the parallel recently, and some people hate this, some people like this, to Ladd McConkey pre-NFL draft landing spot. Now, if you'll recall, there was a quick turnaround. As soon as Ladd McConkey landed with the LA Chargers, everyone was on him, and rightfully so. He had a clear pathway to being the wide receiver 1 on that team. It was almost a perfect landing spot for him. We couldn't have picked a better landing spot in round 2 than LA for Ladd McConkey. But there was that buildup in the period of time around this time of year, 1 year ago, where people pointed at things like the college production. They pointed at some of the metrics saying, maybe Ladd McConkey's not the kind of guy we want to invest in these rookie drafts. When it comes to McConkey and it comes to Golden, they are similar in terms of their speed, in terms of their size. Golden's a 4.29 guy, but I think he plays closer to like the 4.39 that we saw with McConkey on film at Texas. Golden is really, really explosive. He is a late bloomer. I think we're getting a guy headed on an upward trajectory. We saw how Texas started the year using guys like Isaiah Bond as the season progressed, and the money was on the line. Championships were on the line. Matthew Golden took over. We saw it in the SEC championship game against Georgia. Golden goes nuts, 150 receiving yards. We see it in the college football playoff where Golden put Texas on his back, made huge touchdown catch, also had nearly 150 yards, if not 150 yards, against Arizona State, and then, of course, gets knocked out of the game against Ohio State. So Golden was heading up. I think Golden, if he would have gone back to school, would have been the number one pick at the wide receiver spot potentially in this next draft class. We're just getting him a year early. Golden also played next to Tank Dell as a freshman, so his numbers were obviously pushed down. It was completely the Tank Dell show at Houston, and then year 2 for Houston, there were some quarterback issues there. So Golden, this is a guy where I really believe in the explosiveness. And again, if I'm chasing upside, I'm looking for a potential star out of this wide receiver class. I'm going to take shots on Golden.
I agree 100% because I like the upside of Golden better than someone like Egbuka, this is my homer talking, so I'm sorry, guys. If you're new here on Fast Drive, I am a Patriots fan. I hate me too. Matthew Golden is someone who I'd want at the top of the second. I don't think he's going to be there from what I've gathered now. Like it really feels like him and a lot of these other guys may creep up into the first round, but he seems like the ideal guy who could come in and be, like you said, a Lad McConkey. He'd come in and earn targets and be the wide receiver one. And someone like Drake May, I feel like fits his play style more than the slot guy. Because a lot of people want to say the Patriots way, and I get that, and I'm scared, and they do have the same staff. But I just feel like Drake May is a different player than Tom Brady is. So having someone like Matthew Golden would be great. I really would love Matthew Golden on the Panthers. Like these guys that need an explosive player, like a Brian Thomas Jr. type. I'm not saying they're going to be as good or as dynamic, but someone who can actually take the top off of defense. So I know right now on Fast Draft, I can't get him anymore. Let's say if I pick from like the 4th spot, I used to be able to get Golden in that second round. I can't really get him anymore. So it seems like the discount on that has dried up. Well, those are our top 3 guys. We got Tet McMillan, Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden. We'll talk about our next 3 guys, starting with Luther Burden. I think this is someone who is kind of worse in Tech Millen where we're overthinking it, but I think the reasons why people are overthinking it are more valid than Tet McMillan are, because I get it. He didn't have great downfield stats for Missouri, but it's Missouri. So he's one where I feel like Zay Flowers, like I did 2 years ago, he stayed at a place he was loyal to and arguably to a detriment to his draft stock. Are you worried about the gadget allegations for Luther Burden, or is he someone you're avoiding at cost?
I don't think I'm avoiding Luther Burden, and I don't think I'm pushing him up. I think, like for me, as somebody who plays high volume dynasty, I'll end up with some Luther Burden. This is a player where no matter what happens, it's sort of polarization, where you'll have some people want to push him up to the wide receiver 1 overall in the class. You have a number of analytical people who have like put out analytical models want to push Luther Burden way, way up. Luther Burden's also one. So, people bring up the production that took a slip down this past season, but we do have a truly elite year in 2023 in big boy football in the SEC, where he was played out of his mind. He also produced as a true freshman. He was one of the best recruits in the country. And then people were saying this guy's going to be short. He ends up being 6 feet tall at the combine, ends up weighing in over 205 pounds, runs a 4.4. But then now the new argument is the hand size. So this whole hand size thing where I don't know. I think that there are going to be front offices that really, really take into account hand size. We saw it last year with Michael Penix, where one of the things that people loved out of Michael Penix, certainly it's the quarterback spot versus the wide receiver spot, was a lot of these like GMs and sort of old school thinkers want guys who can grip the football. Cold weather comes into play. And I think certainly that's going to matter for Luther Burden with some franchises. Maybe some franchises don't care. But at the end of the day, I think Burden has a range of outcomes with how he'll produce as a pro. Good range of outcomes. I mean, you brought up the fact that gadget guy. When I hear the word gadget guy, for some offensive coordinators, that could be a guy where, hey, I'm going to try to get the ball in his hands a ton. I'm going to put him in the slot, and I'm going to let him get opportunities with the ball in his hands after the play, some yak, all that kind of good stuff. So, like for me, again, sort of like we talked about with Egbuka, landing spot's going to matter with Burden. My fear is some team is going to look at him and say, this is a guy who can really, really help us as a wide receiver 3, and we want to be in 11 personnel all the time, and let's just get Luther Burden and see what happens. I know that his name's been, before Rondale Moore was signed, he was a name that was sort of thrown out there as a potential dark horse for the Minnesota Vikings, just because of how scary he would make that offense and how he could help put pressure on the opposing defense for a young quarterback like J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, that ship has sailed. Washington was a potential landing spot. Now Deebo Samuel's there. Maybe they're kind of superfluous. So I don't know. This is a player where, again, I'm not afraid to have exposure to him in Dynasty, but it's not one where I'm like, I need to get him every single draft.
I think I'm closer to like I'm gonna click the button most cases of when he's there, because like he's closer to my wide receiver 2 than he is where he is now. And like, you know me, Theo, I'm a film guy more than analytics. And I see a team where it's like you said, he's a player like we need to get the ball in his hands as much as possible. And their quarterback Cook just sucked.
Yeah.
And he just sucked. So when he does work downfield, I see him capable of doing all the routes. So like the Rondale Moore stuff, all of that, it's just hard for me to give that directive a comp. But I do agree with what you said about another team doing old man stuff. like a lot of these guys, they just do the old man stuff. And it's like you said, the hand size thing I think is wild, especially after Joe Burrow and that whole fiasco where we're still doing that. I remember Emmanuel Sanders had small hands as well, and the Steelers took him up. I just think you should get ballers. You know, like you took Tank Dell and he weighed like 4 pounds. Yes. You know, you need, let alone with this hand size. If the only thing you're picking at is hands, I think you probably got a decent player. Another one, I know you liked him a lot. He's one that's weird, and I've seen his value jump up all over the place. It's Elic Ayomanor. I'm working on a mock to come out next week that should be out for Player Profiler, but I have mocked him at the end of the first round. I'm kind of pushing him down to the top of the second, more because of the defensive guys. Not so much that I think he sucks. A lot of these defensive guys are going to push some of them down. He's someone that you want to talk about Luther Burden, I'd try to leave with Elic Ayomanor. Right now, I think he's a value, especially when I think about our Origins draft. If you're doing early rookie drafts, I am drafting him early and often, especially if I need a wide receiver. Am I crazy for that?
No, I mean, I think that Elic Ayomanor has a lot of traits that we look for in wide receiver 1s. Yep. And I think that this is one where, again, we talk about guys where we didn't necessarily think they were going to be as fast as they tested at the combine. For Elic Ayomanor to run mid 4.4s was sort of like a chef's kiss. We viewed him as a big-time athlete in terms of his agility, not necessarily this type of burner at that sort of size. I also think that there's a Stanford bias here where a lot of people didn't really see Ayomanor play. And if you weren't necessarily a huge college football fan or somebody who was evaluating NFL draft prospects, then maybe you didn't really miss a whole lot because Stanford was really bad the last 2 years. But when it comes to Ayomanor, again, like if we're chasing wide receiver 1, what guy could turn out and become a wide receiver 1 at this sort of range in the draft? It's Ayomanor. And I think a lot of teams are going to look at him as a locked and loaded wide receiver 2 and a plus wide receiver 2. But I think there are some teams who could view him as a developmental, he ends up becoming our wide receiver 1, maybe as a second-year pro. The tape is insane when it comes to Ayomanor. Some of the plays that he makes, some of his ability to adjust, some of his ability to, as a player of that size, and his route running ability, like Ayomanor checks a ton of boxes off. I think he's got the size, he's got the athleticism, he's got the film, and I think he's going to get that draft capital where, like you said, if he falls out of the first round, I think he's still going to go inside the top 50. And when you start looking at some landing spots, there's a number of these teams picking between 33 and 52, where if Ayomanor lands there, he's got a sort of a clear path. I'm a big fan of his. I'll continue to rank him highly in this class. And I think Jagger, for a lot of people fading him, it's going to be one of those guys where in that short period of time between the actual NFL draft and their dynasty rookie drafts, they're going to have to go and quickly adjust. Because I think the NFL is going to tell you exactly what they think about Elic Ayomanor.
Yep. Yeah, it's like you said, it'll be guys either pushing him up or pushing him down real quick, depending on how that draft works on there. And I love what you said. Like, to me, a lot of these teams picking up top, like Tennessee, the Giants, the Pats, uh, even the Jets, a lot of these, and the big spot where people keep mocking wide receivers, the Patriots here. Draft Will Campbell, go try to get Ayomanor, Golden, Burden. If any of these guys fall to the top or the bottom of the first, then go get them. Go fix that hole. Then you get a guy, like you said, who has an easy path, has the tools and skill to be a 1, or at least a high end 2 for you to get your guy. And I definitely think he's someone that, in my opinion, he's gonna be higher than lower. I could see him jumping Luther Burton, who I like a lot. Especially, I have him ranked ahead of Egbuka right now, but apparently I'm just a hater. And like you said, it's the Stanford bias, man. It even got me, man. Like, when, back in my old company, like, that's all I did was rookie analysis in college football, and along with Dynasty here, everyone was like, you need to look at Elic Ayomanor, and or Ayomanor, and I know that his earlier tape isn't dynamic. One of his best games was against Travis Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he's only gotten better as a prospect since that game, like a better route runner. Like that game, he's just kind of doing big guy stuff, making big guy plays, but see him an actual route runner later on and develop has been truly special to watch. So he's someone I'm targeting.
Yeah. I think also if he would have shown up in Mobile at the Senior Bowl and participated in that, I think he would have had some of the steam we've seen on some of the other guys that we're going to be talking about, where he would have had that natural Senior Bowl bump. And again, he was very, very fast at the combine, but there were faster guys there. Sort of the Golden was the talk, some of the Iowa State guys. So like Ayomanor is just kind of hanging around. But again, I think NFL teams are not going to allow that sort of prospect to fall past pick 50. I'm in for sure.
Heck yeah. And speaking of Iowa State guys, Jaylin Noel, and he's one where he's a come to Jesus player for me. I didn't like him. I put him off for a long time. And then after the Senior Bowl, I really looked at his tape, and everyone talked about the Iowa State guys. I am firmly Noel over Higgins. Like, Higgins seems like a day 2 guy comfortably. By comfortably, I mean, like, I think he's going to be maybe a round 3 guy. Noel, you would talk about a Patriot. He kind of looks like one too. You want to talk about these slots who can earn targets. I could even see someone like Sean Payton really liking him, depending on what they're going to do in that gadget role. He's one where on his tape, man, sometimes you don't see it. You're like, he's just another shifty guy. And then he'll shoot out of a break, man, and just completely clean separate. It's no wonder why he's been a fan favorite.
Yeah, and he was also co-Big 12 Player of the Year on special teams. Explosive with the ball in his hands as a returner in multiple seasons of his career. He also had like 8 touchdowns over 50 yards over his course of his Iowa State career. They played him inside the slot, but despite his size, I don't think he's a guy that's going to necessarily be parked there. I think he can be moved around a little bit. He showed you the unbelievable athleticism and the unbelievable strength, Jagger. He had 23 reps on the bench press at 195 pounds, 4 more than any wide receiver at the combine who tested on the bench. This is a guy where completely dominated the Senior Bowl, then shows up, completely dominates the NFL combine. Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown type usage for him, for some teams. I think it's in the wheelhouse, and I think he gets you the cheat code for where he's going to end up being drafted, because even if he gets drafted like the very beginning of the second, I think sort of the bags are packed and people are going to have him be an early second round pick in dynasty rookie drafts. You see some dynasty rookie mock drafts where he's still a third round pick, which I think is just a little silly at this point. The more and more people dive into Jaylin Noel, the more and more that people really like him. I'm with you. I'm on him over Higgins. I like Higgins, but I think Jaylin Noel, his game really translates to today's NFL, where a peak ceiling season for him is going to be a guy who gets a ton of targets and high-level usage, whereas I think Higgins, his peak ceiling, he's going to end up getting a bunch of touchdown catches. I'd rather take the guy where it's kind of a safer bet, where it's the usage. That being said, I like Higgins as well. And fun stat, the last time we saw a pair of Big 12 wide receivers finish on the same team, finished with 1,000 yards each. It was 2018 with CeeDee Lamb and Hollywood Brown at Oklahoma. So there's a nice little translation into fantasy football success from this.
Yeah, man, 100%. And I love what you mentioned as far as like of what their usage would be as far as like the difference between Higgins and Noel, and especially for fantasy. I think you definitely want to prioritize Jalen. And we're going to be talking about Jayden Higgins. If you're on the audio side tomorrow, we'll have Travis Hunter, Jayden Higgins, Jalen Royals. If you're on the video side, we're jumping into that right now. So hit the like and subscribe button and stick around. And with that being said, we're going to go over one of the most controversial players that you and I, like when we did that pod a while back, disagreed with, which is Travis Hunter. And has anything changed for you since there's been more info out about Travis Hunter? Is he going to be just a cornerback? Is he going to be just a part-time wide receiver? Has anything moved since we have more rumblings, talk, and stuff after the combine?
No, not really. I mean, I love Travis Hunter. I think that there's just a little bit of fear and trepidation with using a guy and using a very high rookie pick on a guy, and then some teams like, you know what, maybe one defensive back goes down with an injury and we can't afford to move Travis Hunter off a cornerback. Like, all sorts of scenarios go through my head. I think what's ultimately going to happen is I think he's going to end up for most leagues reaching a point where he's too good of a value to pass up. Now, you have your own price point in your head where, let's say he gets drafted as a team as a cornerback. Let's say some coach says, yeah, he's going to be a cornerback, but we'll use him on offense some. They don't really give us any like little coach speak on his potential usage. I still think he's so good that you're still going to want a lot of exposure to him. And the further he falls down in my dynasty rookie drafts, probably the more I'm going to get. If he gets drafted by New England and they take him at 4 overall, I think that's when you push him up a little bit. Because I think if you look at a coach that I think would be willing to play a guy almost every snap, it would be Mike Vrabel. And then you couple that with the fact that the lack of teammate talent at the wide receiver spot, I think that would be the fast track spot for Travis Hunter. I actually think the Giants spot is not the worst spot either because Brian Daboll is coaching for his life. And now we have Jameis Winston at quarterback. So that 3-4 area, to me, that's interesting, where I can paint a picture where Travis Hunter can be a 90 target guy opposite Malik Neighbors and still really thrive. Because again, Jameis Winston will push the ball downfield. We've seen his ability to sort of elevate people. And I think a couple of YOLO balls to Travis Hunter to go with about 180 targets to Malik Neighbors sounds pretty good to me. I wish we had more information though, Jagger. I don't know. Maybe I'm playing this too safe, but I do worry with some of these other teams where maybe they do play him at cornerback all the time, and then I only get him as a situational pass catcher, which for me, it doesn't make sense. I think he's a outlier type athlete. If I was coaching an NFL team, I would try to emulate what Colorado did. As much as he's physically able to handle, that's how much he would play. Now, does he have a higher exposure to injury playing both sides of the ball? 100%. But we've seen him be successful with it, and he's got that talent to do so. All it takes is one coach to emulate that model, and all of a sudden we have something really special. But again, we haven't really seen it. So maybe I'm being a little too apprehensive, a little too safe where I have him ranked. But I'll certainly get a lot of them if he falls in my rookie drafts.
Yeah, I know I identify as a risk it for the biscuit type player, which like you get burned. Sometimes you do pretty well. It's just like, I got a lot of Anthony Richardson bags that I'm unloading. So let's put it that way. You know, I don't think Travis Hunter is in the same category though, just because he's been so productive. And then just from a film standpoint, I think he's easily, I think he's the second most talented wide receiver in the class. Personally, it's literally just baggage. If you take away all the other stuff, well, he plays corner, you do all this, and just look at the wide receiver, he's incredibly talented. And you mentioned someone like the Patriots, the Browns, the Titans, basically any of those teams drafting in the top 4, you are silly if you're not going to use him early and often, because he is your best player. With the exception of Drake May, just because he's a quarterback, he is the best player, or Malik Neighbors, I'd say, on all those teams, essentially, like slam dunk, both sides of the ball. So I guess for me, where I would take him, let's say if we're doing straight wide receivers, I'm taking him over Noel. Ayomanor, that's a coin flip if we're playing the exposure game. Like one draft will take him, one draft will take the other. Where if you talk about, let's say like our Origins draft or rookie drafts, it's who else that goes ahead of him. Like let's say our Origins, I have a hard time taking Jackson Dart ahead of him right now, just because I feel like I have more confidence in Travis Hunter than I do on the Jackson Darts going first round rumors on there. And I like Jackson Dart. This isn't like a hate. It's just a confidence level over there. Tyler Warren, that's where I've even seen a lot of tight ends go ahead of him. That's why I start to question of it. But I get your apprehension, and it's more just like how much risk that you're willing to take on. Next to the other guy we kind of alluded to in our previous audio episode or early in the video side, Jayden Higgins. I like him a little more, and I will say I was wrong on, I wouldn't say ignoring him, but putting him off towards in comparison to some of these other guys that I've scouted. But I think his ceiling is a little bit capped. I see him as like a Michael Wilson type. Am I off for that? Where I think he could be a solid wide receiver 2 or X, or even like Romeo Doubs.
See, I think he's way more athletic than those two guys you just mentioned. Higgins, for me, he has the size, and also among this draft class, like one of the bigger wide receivers, also ran very well in the 40, put up the numbers at Iowa State. I think that there's some upside comps when it comes to Jayden Higgins. There's a couple of analytical models that sort of compare him to a Nico Collins, which I'm not there, but I think that there's a pathway in his career where the draft capital and the trajectory, if it goes well, could be similar to like a Cortland Sutton. I think that's the one where I can sort of get behind, where we see what peak Cortland Sutton looks like this year. And I think that's sort of where I'm at with Higgins. Now, there's another argument with Higgins where he's got the skill to be a big slot on some teams, where at 6'4", 214, there's some appeal to that. The reason that Iowa State didn't use him more often in the slot is because they had Jaylin Noel parked there for like, what was it, 70% of the time. So Higgins, I think, does have that pathway, but he's a smooth guy for his size. And again, the athletic numbers backed it up. He did well at the Senior Bowl. I think Higgins has some potential to return value, and I'm able to get him in the back end of the second round in a lot of my mock rookie drafts so far. So I think Higgins has some outs here. Again, I'm maybe a little higher than you are, but I definitely would have him behind Noel if it's a 1-for-1 thing here. I don't think that he necessarily hits that peak outcome like I think Jalen can.
Yep. And for Higgins as like a straight rankings positionally, the only one I'd probably put over him is the next guy we're going to talk about, Jalen Royals. But I think he's like at the appropriate spot. It goes again when you're talking about more of a macro look, when you're looking at like the Origins draft or your rookie drafts, where Higgins is where I'm starting to fade wide receivers as a whole. Where I will start to take more of these tight ends. Like I would take Mason Taylor over Higgins, probably. I would take definitely Colston Loveland over Higgins and stuff like that. Like that's where I worry. And that's why I think even for, let's say, a dynasty rookie draft, I see Higgins falling to the third round for me. Like it'd be hard for me to take him before the third round. Do you think that's a little too late?
I don't know if you'll have the opportunity to get him in some of these dynasty rookie drafts if he does end up getting that draft capital.
For sure.
Now, if he falls, though, and also there's another factor here. You could end up getting a value with him in the third round because we can end up seeing a running back monsoon, because you'll end up getting a running back cleanup, I'm confident, at the beginning of the second round of your dynasty rookie drafts. We don't want to go rookie. I know we're talking wide receivers here, Jagger, but you're going to end up with a bunch of these running backs who, quote unquote, land well. There's going to be the land well guys who end up being day 3 guys or late day 2 guys, but they land really well. Those guys are going to get pushed ahead of some of the wide receivers we like just because of the fact that people are head over heels over this running back spot. So I think there's potential that Higgins and a couple of the other wide receivers, like you mentioned, Royals, could end up falling a little bit just because of the running back steam that and Mason Taylor for that matter, and a couple of these tight ends could end up going behind a number of these running backs, because I think people are going to really, really, really be chasing these running backs. In a lot of years, you end up chasing like running back 9 up to like maybe running back 8, running back 9, and then there's a drop off. But I think this year you might be chasing running back 15 and up after the NFL draft, just because of some of the initial enthusiasm and the initial steam. And we also anticipate a bunch of running backs going in the third round, in the second round. Maybe there's 9 to 12 selected by the end of day 2, which is naturally going to push up some of these guys to early day 3, and we'll see that cleanup. Some of those guys steam up. You think back to years past, like Dameon Pierce, 4th round pick, ends up getting steamed up because of the perceived opportunity, and it creates wide receiver value. It happens every year in Dynasty, but this year it's actually going to happen with guys that we think are really, really talented that might get pushed down because they're not Omarion Hampton, Ashton Genty, Travion Henderson, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like we're going to put guys up that are late running backs, but this is the one year where we probably should more than ever. And that's where this is like what me and Jeff Bell used to say, these are a Schrodinger's values, where like both Higgins becomes like a value and a sell depending on where you're at, because like if like you can get a lot of good running backs, but at the same time you have a wide receiver, like you said, who could have a really good path. Let's say like I could definitely see like the Patriots just ignoring wide receiver. I've watched them do this for my entire life. Like the first 2 rounds, they just ignore wide receiver and then get Jayden Higgins 3rd round. Like we could see something like that. I would even like him on someone like the Jaguars, because I think he's a good complement to Brian Thomas Jr. So
yeah, that would be a really nice landing spot. So yeah, I'm with you. New England needs to draft a wide receiver this year. I mean, they can't do this to Drake May. You can't go Kayshon Boutte as your leading wide receiver heading into the year, and maybe Stephon Diggs whenever he's signed and healthy. Can't do it, Jagger. Can't do it.
I'm going in being disappointed. I know you can't, but they might. The guy, I kind of mentioned him. I like him a little bit more than Jayden Higgins, which is crazy because I have tweets out there in the world where I say that I think he's overrated. That's because I didn't think he was very fast, but it's Jalen Royals. I get really worried about these Mountain West guys. I used to be a CSU media guy. I live out in the Mountain West. I watch a lot of it. It's very poor football out here, Theo. So I worry about some of these guys and how they actually translate to the next level. The dude can run every route. Very crispy. He ran a good 40. I am running out of reasons to hate on Jalen Royals. Where are you at with him?
No, Jalen Royals is certainly one that I had higher than a number of the guys that I've moved up. Before we actually had the Senior Bowl and the Combine, I had a chance to like talk to Jalen Royals down at the Senior Bowl. Really, really like a nice guy to talk to. Some of the guys would kind of rush you off, but Royals I talked to for a long time. He told me he was playing at 80% at the Senior Bowl. Of course, he had that season-ending injury, which happened at like the wrong time because he just completely annihilated UNLV and then had like 200 receiving yards against that Boise State defense. Was headed towards a really strong finish, but he has that 2023 where he had 15 touchdown catches. So all due respect to the Mountain West, even if it's sort of a conference that is not impressing you, Jagger, he had opportunities to go home, go play in Georgia for like an SEC school somewhere close to home, stayed at Utah State, just sort of bought into that program. And then for his season to end with an injury was sort of unfortunate. But he's, to me, you bring up the athleticism, but he's built like a running back. He's really strong physically, really thick. Can manhandle. Yeah, absolutely thick. Like if you just showed up at the Senior Bowl and you didn't know who guys were and didn't know numbers, you would have picked that guy to be in the running back room. Like really well built player. Is like 5'10", like 210 plus. Was manhandling defensive backs underneath. A lot of the drills at the Senior Bowl obviously support wide receiver talent because it's a one-on-one with no help side defender. So guys like Tez Johnson were doing well, but Jalen Royals would just manhandle people to try to get physical with him. And then, like you said, backed it up with a strong combine. Where is he going to get drafted? For me, that's going to matter for him. Does an NFL team say this is a top 50 pick and I'm going to push him in? I think that could happen. if you fall into the third round, the hit rates are not quite as strong. But I do think that his pathway then would be like an more athletic, and this is sort of a recency bias name here, but if you know ball, you know how effective Deontay Johnson was during his peak in Pittsburgh. I think Jalen Royals has some peak Deontay Johnson vibes for me, but he ran better than Deontay ever ran at Toledo. So for me, Jalen Royals has some Deontay Johnson vibes to him, where I think this is a guy that can really win underneath. I think he can be a wide receiver, a very strong wide receiver too. But I want to see that draft capital. This is one where I think you want to go into the NFL draft with an open mind. Let NFL teams tell you how much they value him. If somebody takes him at like pick 45, that means more to me than somebody taking him at pick 75. And I know that sounds
100%.
simplistic. And landing spots matter, but draft capital matters a ton too.
And I've said this before in other pods, but to give you and to support your idea and why it matters that a guy gets drafted earlier, or moreover, why does it matter when a guy gets drafted later, is because you got to think Elic Ayomanor or Jaylin Noel or Jayden Higgins, Jalen Royals, these guys, NFL teams said no 50 times. 50 times they said, no, not this guy. And you got to think all it takes is one guy to say yes. So like when a guy falls, it matters more to me than when a guy goes too high. That doesn't mean I don't value it, but like if Jalen Royals goes second round, I'm like, okay, he's definitely legit. But if he falls to the fifth round, I'm going to be kind of concerned, and I'm probably fading. I don't think he's going to fall that far, to be honest, because I'm putting him in those buckets of wide receivers that the Packers seem to always draft. The Pittsburgh, I would say, would draft him if it wasn't for them just trading for DK Metcalf. These second, third round guys that a lot of us Devy nerds and these dynasty nerds, like we all really like, but the NFL may not draft so highly, and they go to a situation where there's an opportunity for them to really boost their value. And that's what we're kind of hoping for there. And that's like right now in like the Origins draft, he's 24 right now, ranked 24. I can't push him up any higher with that information. Maybe you want to take him over someone like Woody Marks or Devin Neal, depending on where you're at on these running backs. But he's appropriately priced, and for that, I like his price.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. How about Green Bay takes him into the second round, and we get the Utah State to Utah State connection in a pathway where, again, they need wide receivers in Green Bay. I think that would be a good spot for him. There's a number of these teams in the second round you can make a case for Jalen Royals.
I think the Packers are going to take him. Like you heard at the Senior Bowl, they met with him often. Yeah, like he's one of the guys that are on the list. So like I said Packers for a reason. I was like, I just know they're going to love this guy. Like what a wide receiver we don't have to pay a first round pick for. And he's going to end up there. Well, we just covered Travis Hunter, Jayden Higgins, Jalen Royals. For our audio folks, we got Tre Harris, Jack Bech, and Isaiah Bond coming up next. For Tre Harris, I have been the biggest Tre Harris hater, and I still am the biggest Tre Harris hater. All my comps for him are kind of like a Rorschach test on what you look for at wide receiver when you're scouting. I've compared him to kind of Christian Watson. I actually really like our comp for him in our rookie guide. Where is he at here? Wide receiver 10. We have him at Marquez Callaway. I think he's going to do more cardio than he is give us fantasy points. Am I hating too much, Theo?
No, I don't think you are. And I've gotten in big arguments with people about this. And I think, 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, I would get into Matthew Golden versus Tre Harris arguments. I don't have to do that anymore. Now it's sort of like the Tre Harris versus Jayden Higgins argument. Now, Tre Harris versus Jayden Higgins. Jayden Higgins is younger. Jayden Higgins is faster. Jayden Higgins is taller. And it's sort of the same sort of argument. Tre Harris, I think, is going to fall into the third round. And I know some people are still hopeful for that second round draft capital. But when the Tre Harris narrative started, it's Tre Harris is going to get drafted in the top 25. Tre Harris is going to go to Washington and be a commander in the first round. Tre Harris is going to be super fast at the combine. Like, for me, a few things we can't take away from Tre Harris. The guy had 1,000 receiving yards in 8 games in the SEC. That matters. The guy transferred up from Louisiana Tech to Ole Miss and produced. So he went up a level of competition and he produced. I'll give him that. But at the end of the day, there's so many wide receivers like this in the NFL who have had this sort of narrative and then don't hit for us in fantasy football. I'll throw out a couple names here. They all went in this similar end of the first to the early third range. Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Legette, Cedric Tillman, big SEC wide receiver. People get into. Then he ends up getting drafted maybe at a place you're not that enthusiastic about. People will still say big X wide receiver in the NFL out of the SEC. Look at that draft capital. And then all of a sudden, it's guys that are sort of unusable in fantasy. Now, the Xavier Legette story has not fully been told. But at the end of the day, I don't think you saw this year something that says Xavier Legette's going to end up being a top 15 wide receiver at any point in his career. So for me, I think that there's a lot of profiles. You brought up our comp of Marquez Callaway. Like, insert your favorite big SEC wide receiver that people start making that argument for, and the guy ends up getting kind of a little bit of too much hype in the dynasty community pre-rookie draft, pre-NFL draft. And there's another thing about Tre Harris is it's like that sticky price tag where he's a name, where he's going to stick around and people don't necessarily adjust based on what NFL teams are going to do. We saw it last year with Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin falls to the 4th round. People didn't necessarily adjust. People are still drafting Troy Franklin. For me, I just don't think I'm going to end up with a lot of Tre Harris because I have him behind Jayden Higgins, and I think in a lot of leagues I'll be able to get Jayden Higgins after him. So that's sort of where I'm at on Tre.
Out of every wide receiver that we're going to talk about, and we have talked about, I would take them over Tre Harris, whether that's at cost or whatever. I'm probably going to be a 0 shares guy. This how it was with Christian Watson though too. And to be fair, I'm not. It could be he's a better football player than he is fantasy. Where I can even see a team taking a 2nd round on him. A team drafted Jonathan Mingo and Xavier Legette. Am I saying that the Panthers are going to do it? Maybe, but I think that he's going to push defenses or push secondaries downfield. And I do think he's going to be mainly a sacrificial X, and he's going to be doing a lot of cardio. I just don't see him being an elite target earner. So sorry guys, feel free to hate on us in the comments. And this is another crazy one on here. You were at the Senior Bowl. Jack Bech, man. I like him. I like him. And especially it's a cost thing. I don't think he's going to be a day 1 guy, obviously. I even question if he's going to be a day 2 guy, but he has a skill set that teams like, and I think he can earn targets.
I think he's a day 2 guy. I think I would bet on that. I think some team's going to pull the trigger on day 2.
I could see it.
Yeah. And again, like, he's got the frame, and I think he's versatile, had a really big Senior Bowl. The guy played tight end early on and then converted to wide receiver smartly. He's not an NFL tight end size guy, but when you see him in person, he's a very big, strong wide receiver. I hate doing the white guy for white guy comparison, but I think he could be Adam Thielen on the right team.
That was actually mine. Was Adam Thielen?
So there we go.
Well.
We're on the same wavelength. Adam Thielen's one I've sort of said on a couple of shows now, where I think that's the pathway for Jack Bech. I think he's a wide receiver 2 for a lot of teams. And I think where you're going to be able to invest in him, wide receiver 2 makes a lot of sense. And I think this is a guy where, like you said, I think he's going to be an NFL target earner. Maybe it takes him a year. Maybe he doesn't explode out the gate. But I think where you're going to have to invest in him in your rookie drafts, I don't think that's necessarily going to matter. But I start looking at some of these teams in the 3rd round. I think that there's too many teams in the 3rd round that need wide receiver that are going to be able to pass on Jack Bech. And he's also, again, he's got that size, he's got that versatility, and I think he's going to earn targets at the NFL level. And he gets the Senior Bowl boost, where guys that excel at the Senior Bowl, we've seen it every single year, they get pushed up. We saw it with guys like Roman Wilson, guys like Ricky Pearsall, certainly Ladd McConkey, and Jack Bech. Yeah, and you can go back multiple years here. But at the end of the day, Jack Bech, the steam started at the Senior Bowl, and I think it'll continue. This is a player where I think NFL teams are going to like him. also the LSU trajectory where he transfers to TCU, but he had production at LSU. I know people love throwing out all these guys that he out earned in terms of production and statistics at LSU. I don't know about that one. A lot of those guys were young at the time, but at the end of the day, Jack Bech has been able to earn targets when next to NFL players, and I think he could do it again at the next level. You could circle a ton of teams from like pick number 71 down to like pick 95. Somebody's going to take him there.
Yeah, and going back through some of these, one landing spot that I really like in a team I think would be smart, the Commanders. Yeah, you just got Debo, but what Debo did you get? And who do we have after Debo? Still kind of nobody. You really want 4 at least NFL, I would say, starter caliber players, and I don't think the Commanders have that, so I love that spot like that. The Chargers still need some guys, like it's just Lad McConkey. Yeah, like you said, like I definitely see another one of these teams double dip at wide receiver. They'll get some guy first round, get something else second round, and then get someone else in the third round just to fill it out. Like a lot of these receiver rooms are pretty bleak. One that actually sticks out to me, Dallas Cowboys. I can see it there. That'd be an ideal spot there because people forget. Like I think Tolbert is fine for where he's at, but having someone like CeeDee and then someone like Jack Bech, it would be ideal for Dak Prescott if that's the direction they're going to roll. So he's going to be a guy I'm going to have a lot of exposure to, just because his price is so cheap. It's just so cheap right now. So. Last one we're going to talk about is Isaiah Bond. You want to talk about someone who has started high, and I feel like for a while, every week I was doing my Dynasty Big Board. I'm like, well, how far are we going to push Isaiah Bond down today? Basically after the season. And I still don't think he's a bad player. And I think we might have pushed him down maybe too far, because I would definitely take him over Tre Harris. I think the upside is higher than Jack Bech. I think we may overrate Quinn Ewers as a player, and I mean as a college player, not just as an NFL player, and kind of underrate just how poor he was at getting the most out of these receivers like Golden and Bond.
Yeah, I think with Bond, like you said, that it's been an overcorrection in the Dynasty community, where this was a guy that it's also been really, really punished for running the 4.4, but he had the 24 miles per hour GPS testing as well, which is absolutely flying.
Blazing.
It's insane. So it doesn't make sense to me that he's a 4.4 guy at the combine and he runs 24 miles per hour. I mean, you think about like Jalen Milroe, people love pointing out the fact that he hit 22.5 miles per hour on a touchdown run this past season, and therefore this was going to be a 4.3, 4.4 guy, and he's running faster than Bond, who's at 24 miles per hour. So I don't know. For me, I think that NFL teams are going to view him faster. I think that there's going to be a team that pulls the trigger in round 2, and we're going to have to over-adjust. Now, Isaiah Bond not going in the first round, I think, is a hit to him, because a lot of the comps saying that this guy could be a Jameson Williams, Jalen Waddle type usage, that sort of goes out the window when you go to round 2. So the pathways towards big-time fantasy football viability go down a little bit, and your chances of becoming a really fast wide receiver 3 who stylistically helps just about any NFL offense, but doesn't necessarily move the needle for us in fantasy, that goes up a little bit. There's some interesting landing spots where you look at teams like Detroit at 60, Baltimore at 59, Philadelphia at 64. All of them could use a guy like Isaiah Bond to just turbocharge their offense a little bit more. And if he lands on teams like that, that's not a guy that's going to be in our starting lineup unless there's an injury around him. That's sort of my take with Isaiah Bond. But he is super explosive. He did produce as a young player. He played at the highest levels of college football. And this past year, he was banged up at Texas. And we talked about like the knock on Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden didn't have 1,000 receiving yards, but Matthew Golden is nasty. Both of these guys suffered because of Quinn Ewers not being that good. Shout out to the Quinn Ewers believers out there. I'm not one of them. And I think Quinn Ewers was like, yeah, and I know you're not for sure. But there's, he was a detriment to these guys. Isaiah Bond, maybe, don't leave Alabama. And in that situation, I think, the connection he showed with Milroe, people might have been more into that. So I don't know. For me, I think that the expectations were on him to become Xavier Worthy, and he wasn't. But there was also just, it didn't happen this year at Texas. But I think there's certain NFL teams that might view him as a guy who can really, really help us, and he still can fly even at 4.4. I think he's closer to a 4.3 guy.
Yeah, I know my ceiling for him is Jordan Addison, meaning I think he'd come in and be a very explosive wide receiver 2 for a team. But I definitely think his floor is, I would say, first half of the season worthy, not second half of the season worthy, where they actually were, giving him more than just 2 targets or whatever. Because like you said, the NFL usage is there. He's going to be a field stretcher, dynamic Z, but actually being beneficial to us in our fantasy lineups, that is something that leaves a lot to be desired. And I love the Eagles landing spot because, like you said, man, imagine Isaiah Bond in the Jahan Dotson role. That isn't great, but I think that becomes a wide receiver handcuff. Because, like, why were you rostering Josh Palmer if you had to at the time? You weren't rostering him because you want to put him in your lineup, but when we saw Keenan Allen or Mike Williams or something happen to him, he immediately hopped into a role and became a target earner, and I could see that path for Isaiah Bond. Well, for our video side, those are our top 12. Again, guys, if you want our full list and our full rookie guide, I'll have that link down there. You can download that from RotoUnderworld. We have our Fast Draft Origins tournament. You have a month, and we're only a quarter of the way full right now. That's heating up. More and more of those are firing off as we get closer to the draft. We got the Fast Draft code right here on the screen. You can use code Jagger. I'm sure Theo has a code. It's super easy for you to download Fast Draft right now. And again, it's quick. We want you to get in, get a nice draft in, and not waste your time doing mocks when you can be drafting with real people for real money. The audio side, a lot of these, we'll have these almost every day during the middle of the week. On the video, like, subscribe, leave any comments or anything. If you have any trade advice, any rookie comments, I'll be there to answer for you. Again, as always, I'm Jagger. Theo will be on here regularly as always. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
So I thought I needed